This right here is the superhero movie for people who hate superheroes. Like, I'm talking day 2 no hating levels of who gives a fudge. So why me, a guy who has never been into superheroes for about as long as he's been alive? What made me want to check out Pansexual Man? I don't know, might have been this review or this car fight scene or this guy living under a rock, and I was bored one day, so I decided to watch the first movie, and holy sh**, I am soaking wet right now. So I guess we'll start from there. But wait, how did it come to be? I don't know. So the character first appeared in a Marvel comic from late 1990, blah blah blah, Slade, Wolverine, Spider-Man if he was an asshole, yada yada yada, but I never read the Deadpool comics, and probably never will, so I guess that means I can't judge this as an adaptation. What's it about, anyway? Also spoilers for all 3 movies, I guess. Well, Deadpool / Wade Winston Wilson wants to track down this guy named Francis because Wade went to his workshop after being told Francis could cure his cancer and then some. And it does work. He gets his fancy healing powers after being forced to listen to fentanyl, but it also made him ugly. And Deadpool wants to be not ugly because he left his girlfriend Vanessa around a year ago to get that treatment, and he thinks she won't accept him back due to being built like Ian Miles Chong, and he wants his anti-ugly pills or whatever. First of all, throughout the movie, whenever someone talks about Wade being a hero, he's all like, "No way, Jose, that's not me!" and says that superheroes are lame because they're all goody two-shoes, and after watching this video, yeah, he makes a good point. In this video, the guy who made it talks about how these kind of characters are criticized and teased because they come off boring or predictable or preachy, since they're all about doing the right thing. So the easiest way to subvert that is to just have a lead character who doesn't always do the right thing. Instead of getting law enforcement to investigate Francis, Deadpool decides to torture his henchmen to learn where he's hiding, and if any NPCs get in his way, he'll just kill them. At the end, when Colossus is talking about sparing Francis, Deadpool kills him anyway because he knows he's not above killing people. Before he becomes Deadpool, he threatens some guy who's stalking a girl, and then after he becomes Deadpool, he admits that he was stalking Vanessa as well. Even his motivation for tracking down Francis is kinda selfish. He literally wants to be hot again, and in the end, it's not his appearance that upsets Vanessa, it's that he never told her what happened when he had all the time in the world to do so. And you know, Francis wouldn't really have any incentive to look for Wade either. After the workshop collapsed, he assumed Wade was dead, and even if he knew Wade would survive, there would be no point in seeking his own revenge, as Wade would just keep coming back. So really, Wade should have just reunited with Vanessa when he had the chance without enacting revenge, but because he's so thoughtless, he assumed sex was the only thing keeping their relationship together, even though they'd been dating for a year at that point, and they didn't seem to struggle when they gave up sex for Lent, and even the first time they met, they hit it off immediately since they both grew up in abusive households. And it's not until after learning there were no anti-ugly pills that he realizes he wasted his time, so he just allows himself to be wrong, and that allows him to overcome his insecurity. Guess we talked about the jokes now. Even as Wade Wilson, Deadpool's consistently an immature jokester, even when the stakes are kinda high. There aren't a whole lot of moments I can think of where Deadpool is reenacting serious business from Teen Titans Go, though I will name the whole sequence after Wade escapes his torture pod and him realizing that Francis kidnapped Vanessa, which probably wasn't meant to be as funny as Ryan Reynolds made it.
Let's just.
Chocolate!
Well, we can talk
Germany!
about what we're gonna. Okay, or you can hit that. Yeah. No. All right.
And for the most part, Deadpool is the only funny haha character, and everyone around him thinks he's an annoying douchebag. Because he is, so he embraces everyone's perception of him. Even the old blind lady thinks he's annoying, and she's blind. The humor is definitely a contrast to something like Velma, where the only joke they tell is, Like, Scoob, this is just like when this happens in, like, rom-coms, dude! And it only exists as a cheap way of pretending to be more creative. Meanwhile, in this movie, they actually try to be subversive and funny, on top of just having a competent story in general. And each individual joke doesn't overstay its welcome. Also, unlike Velma, you wouldn't expect that when these moments are so short, but just watch the first episode. A lot of them feel way too long, and they're so much more frequent too. Okay, let's try and wrap this up already. Not really any major complaints other than the story's a little straightforward and minimal, and I think that's because it's focused by far on Deadpool more than anyone else. It's much more of an origin story, really. The romance plot is serviceable, it at least gives us something to keep us on edge since we know Deadpool's not gonna die. Francis is kinda stupid. The stuff about being a hero doesn't really stick with you that long. Wade having cancer is kinda just asking you to care about him, at least for me. And the most unforgivable, Canadians is celebrating Thanksgiving after Halloween. And Deadpool touches a minor. Alright, first movie knocked it right out of the park, and it made like $700 million, and 2 years later, we got Deadpool 2, Pansexual Boogaloo. At first, Wade is miserable and hates himself because he was unable to save Vanessa from being accidentally murdered, but then he finds an opportunity to redeem himself after learning Megalodon traveled back in time for revenge murder on this kid named Russell, because due to his anger issues and being abused by some anti-mutant guys or whatever, he became a serial killer, and one of his victims was Megalodon's family. After a while, Deadpool assembles the X-Force, all of which die except Domino, to try and stop Megalodon, but Russell unleashes Juggernaut to help him with his own revenge against the headmaster of the anti-mutant thingy, to which Deadpool and Domino now have to team up with Megalodon to first take care of Juggernaut and stop Russell from beginning his descent into a mass murderer. The first thing I immediately noticed is that even towards the beginning, there's a lot more story to witness here than Deadpool 1. There's more focus on themes now, rather than just showing who Deadpool is and why him knowing he's in a movie is both funny and not irritating. Identifying what's the right thing to do, finding hope and self-worth and a place of belonging, being morally flexible, and so on, and it even goes harder on the superhero stuff from last time. Deadpool still doesn't see himself as a hero, except this time it's not just from seeing them as lame-os, it's also a result of Deadpool's new insecurity from his inability to protect Vanessa after he bailed out on his mission, which led to the hippy-dippy looking guy tracking him down. He allows Juggernaut to rip him in half, even most of the X-Force dies because he assumed everyone would be able to adapt to the strong wind, and at the end, he finally feels fulfilled after allowing himself to die for Russell's safety, which encourages him to not kill anyone. And other characters get a greater chance to shine as well. Megalodon is continuously encouraged by Deadpool to spare Russell, and after seeing Russell's change of heart lead to sparing his family, he still doesn't feel satisfied knowing a more selfless Deadpool had enough hope in Russell to sacrifice himself, so he uses the last of his nitro to travel again and save Deadpool's life, while ensuring the sacrifice still gets across to Russell, who, speaking of, is a misguided kid, so he especially doesn't know what he's doing. He causes trouble in the icebox to get by in prison life, and after thinking Wade doesn't care about him, he falls deeper into his anger by allowing Juggernaut to cause chaos, thinking the only way to deal with his trauma is a never-ending search for vengeance and destruction. Colossus is at first unwilling to allow and help Deadpool to do his business, but then changes his mind after deciding that maybe Deadpool is right about how doing the right thing won't always be easy or clean. Even Dopinder has more to do than last time. Throughout the film, he continuously expresses that he wants to be an assassin, and at the very end, he finally does get the chance to kill someone, so he kills the anti-mutant headmaster. Domino doesn't really have as much of an arc, she mostly just exists, I think, to satirize overpowered action protagonists and was apparently not created specifically for this movie and always had luck powers. What? The humor has also remained more so the same. Deadpool remains as silly as ever, except for when Vanessa dies. He gets accused of hating lesbians, which turns him into an SJW libtard, calling the name X-Men sexist and telling Megalodon that racism is bad, by the way. And this death scene, oh boy, not only is he still a jokester here, but while I was watching it for the first time, I was like, wait, is he actually dying? Is that power restrainer thing on his neck working? It takes a while and he keeps fake dying, but yes, he does actually die. Until Megalodon breaks out his time machine. Everything benefits each other as well. Megalodon claims the murder of his family was his fault, representing what the old Wade would have become if the same thing happened to him, and acting as a parallel for their desire for redemption. Russell acts as a parallel to Deadpool's more cynical and vengeful side. I already mentioned this, but Juggernaut is basically Russell's anger personified. Basically, one of the few times where the sequel is better or at least more enjoyable than the original. There's really only one major thing that I would consider bad about this story, and don't worry, I've got plenty to say this time. Remember when I said that Megalodon used up the last of his nitro to travel back to right before the climax to prevent Deadpool from dying while still ensuring his planned sacrifice would register to Russell and not convince him to become a murderer, making a sacrifice of his own by exchanging his chance to be with his family again to protect the most selfless and relatable person he's met? Well, after the cool credits, Negasonic Teenage Warhead and her girlfriend Yukio are repairing Megalodon's time machine because Deadpool used it to save Peter from the X-Force, and more importantly, Vanessa. So then doesn't that mean the entire second movie wouldn't have happened? I guess you could say he earned it after his sacrifice, but that was already established as closure for Megalodon, and part of Deadpool's arc was learning to accept Vanessa's death, so other than being in character, this only exists to be funny and give Deadpool a happy squared ending, and since the time machine still works, that means Megalodon can go home. No consequences, just what the people wanted. Meanwhile, in the last movie, him learning he can't have his appearance fixed is almost a punishment for abandoning Vanessa. He didn't get exactly what he wanted, and that's because he needed to own up to his mistakes instead. I would still say Deadpool 2 has a better story, but you gotta admit, those last few minutes don't deserve the $700 million this movie also made. The only other way I can excuse it is that it fits one of the film's other lessons on how there's always a second option. It might as well not be canon, but unfortunately, it carries over in... Aw yeah, baby. It's my first MCU movie. Alright, you know the drill. Wade is struggling with his self-worth and sense of purpose again after being declined from joining the Avengers and breaking up with Vanessa, but after learning this Mr. Paradox guy plans to end his universe early instead of allowing it to die of natural causes in a few thousand years due to the death of its anchor being Wolverine, Deadpool and an alternate version of Wolverine get transported to the Void and have to find a way to escape and save the world. And after Deadpool and Wolverine do escape the Void, this bald bitch Cassandra Nova follows them through and tries to end the entire multiverse until all that's left is the Void, which is apparently bad. Quite the leap in stakes, TBH. Alright, where do I start? How about the title characters? So in a previous X-Men film, which I did not watch, Wolverine sacrificed his life for something, even though it's not supposed to happen again for another 5 years, and because he was the anchor being in this universe, it's starting to end early, so Deadpool decides to go find a new Wolverine within the multiverse and ends up with the worst Wolverine, who apparently killed all the mutants in his world and started killing others to vent his guilt or something. I don't know, it's a little complicated, but I think that's the gist of it. Deadpool is told he can't replace anchor beings, so he decides to tell on Mr. Paradox, and then he sends Deadpool and Wolverine to the Wasteland. From there, it's a pretty straightforward journey of the two trying to get along as they search for the others and escape the Void with their help, and attempt to stop Cassandra Nova from killing everything. Deadpool's self-worth is absolutely demolished this time as well. This Avengers guy insists that Wade should aim for the middle after rejecting him from joining the Avengers. Mr. Paradox laughs in his face after he assumes he's the anchor being. Cassandra Nova teases him after using her powers to learn about his current struggle. Even Wolverine thinks he's worthless, and he also hates himself for ruining his whole world, and the only reason he teams up with Deadpool at all is because he blatantly lied about the TVA being able to fix his universe, and when he realizes this, he gives Deadpool a fucking Brian is such a bore level beatdown of every reason he hates him, which of course also leads into that car fight scene. And once they arrive at the place where they have to destroy the Time Ripper, which was taken over by Cassandra Nova, they decide to make peace with each other, knowing one of them will die, making the matter and antimatter connection. Wade admits he lied and that he should sacrifice himself to make up for forcing Wolverine to join him, but Wolverine insists that he should do it instead since his life is already at rock bottom. But then Deadpool locks him out so he can sacrifice himself instead, to which Wolverine busts in to help Deadpool make the connection. Wade finally found a purpose greater than himself or a small collective, since he already started more selfless than usual, and Logan redeemed himself for ruining everything in his home. And Cassandra Nova dies too, I guess. But then, psych! Turns out they both survive, because I guess no one considered what would happen if two people with regenerative healing factor mended the gap. If there's one thing you can say about this movie that's absolutely good, it's easily, well, Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool himself has remained consistent as always, though at some points it feels like this film forgot that the last movie was also about Deadpool becoming more selfless. I can kinda see where they're going with this though, him getting so caught up with doing his thing that it's almost like he forgot he wanted to be an Avenger, which he obviously didn't forget about, but the last film was all about him seeking redemption. Here, he just saves the multiverse knowing it's the right thing to do, and doesn't even care if he can't do anything else down the road after willingly accomplishing something so massive. Though it's implied that here Wolverine became his universe's anchor being after that, so once again, not much lost here. It could have led to another great lesson on how just because he's not important doesn't mean he can't do good things. That sounds more like something Wolverine should earn. Speaking of which, Deadpool doesn't really do as many bad things in this movie. He steals Mr. Paradox's teleporter thingy and digs up the corpse of his Wolverine, which sends the TVA law enforcement after him and uses his Wolverine skeleton to kill all of them. What else? He gets Johnny killed, he lies to Wolverine and accidentally admits it, which led to them fighting again. He gets Nicepool killed, but let's be real, no one cares about Nicepool. Meanwhile, in the last two movies, Deadpool causes a good handful of his own problems, such as, I had a feeling there would be some kind of catch arising from a more selfless Deadpool. Maybe he hasn't remained so consistent after all. Wolverine's lack of input, on the other hand, is somewhat understandable, as he probably thinks he's gonna screw up again. As for Deadpool though, he doesn't seek out the TVA at first. When he first gets there, it's because they literally kidnapped him, and then Mr. Paradox offers him the chance to join the Avengers again. After the car fight scene, the others find the duo and not the other way around. Also, they still deliver the funny, but Deadpool doesn't really stand out as much anymore. Part of what made the last two movies funny was that Deadpool was a reverse straight man, and he bounces excellently off of Wolverine since he's so cynical, but when you put him in the main MCU with all these other quirky coded characters, the most Deadpool joke he does is profanity. It almost reaches Velma levels at one point, where he's talking about how multiverse movies in the past few years have been really bad, even though this is a multiverse movie because that's what Disney ordered. It's almost like their idea of a Deadpool movie was that one clip from the Chip and Dale movie where Sonic says,
"You can't hurt my feelings if I'm in on the job!"
What else is there? The cameos don't really do anything. Sometimes they're funny, like when Wolverine immediately kills Sabretooth, or when Deadpool is excited about teaming up with Magneto only for him to not show up at all because he died, but they're mostly just dead weight. Like the previous characters who show up in this movie, at least they're trying something new by shying away from them. Peter completely replaces Deadpool's friend Weasel this time. He was never one of my favorite characters, but he had a clear role, he did stuff that could constitute as meaningful, and he's just been completely removed in favor of a character who really should have never came back. The whole joke was that he was literally just a normal guy among superheroes. He was intentionally disposable like the other X-Force members, and thankfully he is given more to do this time as Wade's new best friend, encouraging him to reach for more than what he's doing now. But you can't just ditch the guy who's been his best bud before he even met Vanessa, and at the end he just gets a repeat of Dopender's arc from last time, which was also better. Alright, enough YouTube reviewing right now. I'm gonna have to say something positive before I become a Teen Titans fan. This might be the worst in the trilogy for reasons like the stuff I just mentioned, or how the villains are back to being a little dumb again, but I will compliment this. Deadpool and Wolverine easily has the best action scenes. When I first saw this, I thought the VFX were less than convincing, but after watching multiple times, it's not that bad, especially compared to Deadpool 2, where it looks really terrible sometimes, like I'm watching a 3D Nickelodeon cartoon. So yeah, if you thought the first movie was a little safe and bare bones, you might not like this one, or at least you'll agree that it's the worst Deadpool film, but it still has value. The main duo sells it.
Back in civilian life, I wear a toupee, but nobody knows. Everybody knows.
And by it, I mean like $1 billion. And finally, I can indeed confirm that Deadpool 3, Wade Wilson's pansexual awakening, is not anti-woke. Okay, I think we're ready to wrap this up now. I can definitely see why these movies took off, especially in an era where most people are tired of superheroes. They're creative, they're funny, and they actually try to bring a competent story into the midst of all the Deadpooling. My favorite part, hands down, is when Deadpool says, "It's poolin' time," and pools all over the place. Should I watch Morbius? That could be another video. Makes you wish they didn't cancel the cartoon as well. Of course, they're not the best movies ever made, but if you want to watch something silly and refreshing, go ahead, man. Or don't. I'm not your dad. But I'm doing your mom! Alright, that's the end of the video. Subscribe and check back in 3 years when I review the fucking Gwenpool movie.